No, I mean
they're
in
always a
in
top
football.
25 team. Oh, I mean, yeah, Andrew Luck was there.
Oh, that's right. He was. Yeah. See, this is what happens when a baseball
The
guy
Jim
tries
Harbaugh
talking
era
about.
was pretty good, and then the early part of David Shaw was good, and then the last like 7, they were refusing to play the NIL game, and we
Okay.
played the NIL game.
Oh, well, I can understand why. They're the Ivy of the West, so,
Yeah, so
they would not deign themselves to think of so low a prospect as paying a student athlete for their labor.
Yeah.
But yes, the Cardinals of the National League Central are an absolute dumpster fire.
I mean, we joked like take graphs. You saw it, but you don't want to go all the way out. And now they're the worst team in a division with a lot of bad teams, John.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see this coming. Like this is
No, I don't think anyone saw this coming. No.
I mean, where do you go here? Like what happens? Does it get worse? Can they climb out? Who do you blame the most for this just completely imploding?
Apparently, all the blame belongs with Yadier Molina because he apparently was the only guy who knew how to do pitch preparation in St. Louis. I'll start with the Wilson Contreras stuff because I think it's most emblematic of just entirely what's gone wrong in St. Louis, which just seems like they have just decided that there's no point in trying. Let me say that better. What seems to have been the case in St. Louis, or what seems to be the case in St. Louis, is that everything is just kind of stagnated. That there just seemed to be this kind of idea. It's like, oh, well, we're just going to have Yadier Molina and Adam Wainwright forever, and everything will be great. What I don't really understand is you had a year to prepare for Yadier Molina no longer being the catcher of the Cardinals because of his very, demonstrative, like, I'm retiring and I'm going away and you're not going to have Yadier Molina anymore. Like, this should not have caught the Cardinals by surprise that, to go into the whole Contreras thing, that the catcher they got to replace Yadier Molina is not Yadier Molina. And I think that's where, when I say stagnation, I think there's this there's this huge seemingly lack of imagination in St. Louis. There's this real lack of, of free thinking or of even new thinking. I don't understand why the expectation was that Wilson Contreras was just going to do what Yadier Molina did. They are obviously not the same player, but particularly not the same player when it comes to their defense. And that's not as much a knock on Contreras as it is kind of propping up Molina, but Contreras has never been a great defensive catcher. And the Cardinals had to know that when they signed him. It's not exactly like that was a secret. There are all kinds of numbers that will tell you that now. To say nothing of the fact that he has been playing for one of their division rivals for literally his entire career. All they had to do was literally watch a Cubs-Cardinals game one time, watch Contreras behind the plate and go, oh, okay, I guess, well, maybe that's not what we want. And look, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe there's some weird culture or personality fit that's just not working out here with Contreras and the pitching staff. But it just fundamentally, to me, does not make sense that either the Cardinals thought that Contreras was just going to take over seamlessly from Molina and that everything was going to be the same. That just speaks to a total lack of foresight and planning. It also just says it's also just insane to me that they looked at this pitching staff, which I think everyone before the season looked at and went, "That's not a great pitching staff. Like this is not a particularly impact group of guys." When Jordan Montgomery is your clear number one, can you really be surprised when they're not performing well? Like
that being said, but they didn't think it was gonna be this bad. Like not well, but like average. Like we thought they would.
Sure, and I expected average too. I expected
horrible.
Average.
This is not average. This is like the season's over. Like this is a clean house type situation now.
And this is what makes me think that ultimately the blame has to go to John Mozeliak and Ollie Marmol. Like, if you're Mozeliak, and this has been a common refrain of mine for the Cardinals for a bit now, but I don't know how you could go into the season with that rotation and feel like you had enough. And similarly, I don't understand in the least how you can look at Contreras and one, make him the scapegoat, and two, decide that the best way to recoup his value is to put him at a position where he has to produce more in order to be better relative to the position, and you create a logjam where guys like Nolan Gorman no longer have easy playing time. How does this help you? How does it help you to get Andrew Knizner's bat, or Knizner, White Molina? How does it help you at all to get his bat in the lineup? He's not even a good defender. That's the other side of it. Like, what I think, why I just kind of zero in on Mozeliak is because these moves do not feel like they are being made by someone who is is thinking clearly, or who has like a plan of action for how to fix this. This feels like throwing everything you can against the wall, seeing what sticks, and then scraping off what sticks onto a plate and trying to serve it to people. Be like, what about this? Do you like this? How about this? Like, there does not seem to be anyone in charge right now. Or at least the people who are in charge don't seem to have any ideas beyond, well, why don't we blame the catcher? And I think that extends to Marmol, too. And I think you could get that sense when that whole dust up with Tyler O'Neill happened, where he got called out for not running all the way out to first base, which that happens. I mean, we saw it happen to something similar happen with Javi Baez, where he forgot how many outs there were, and A.J. Hinch immediately pulled him, and that seemed to get Baez's head on a little straighter. But the way Marmol went about it, and I think the way that, O'Neill in particular seemed kind of upset that it was, why am I getting called out in the press over this? Why is this not an in-house discussion? That's worrisome to me, because that's the kind of thing, it's like, you can't be doing the stuff to piss off players like that and potentially lose a clubhouse like 3 days into the season. That does not speak well of Ollie Marmol's leadership capacity or capabilities. And neither does this Contreras stuff, honestly. You're the manager. This team is under your charge. I don't care if it's someone else's responsibility to get the pitchers ready, if it's someone else's responsibility to lead those meetings. You have to be the one to stand up and say, it's not good enough and that's my fault. You cannot be going out there and saying, actually, the catcher is the problem. We need to move the catcher. That is ducking responsibility in a really, really hard way. And I think that pretty well sums up to me what seems to be the problem in St. Louis, is that no one in charge seems either willing to be in charge or has the ideas necessary to be in charge. And it does kind of give you the feeling like this franchise does seem to have been kind of floating, in a sense. That there's not really been that step forward that other franchises have taken, at least with regards to optimizing the roster, with regards to getting the most out of your players. And granted, St. Louis has done really well with its player development, although I think there's some red flags there too in guys like Dylan Carlson and the way that has kind of played out, in the way Tyler O'Neill has seemingly gone backwards, in the way that none of the pitching has really panned out. I think the way St. Louis, none of the homegrown pitching at least, some of that's been injury, but at the same time, like, nothing St. Louis is doing really seems to be working at this point. And while I think, you're right, we all expected average, I don't think anyone expected anything this bad, but it does seem to me like, if this is a franchise where it does, again, feel like no one's really in charge and everything is just kind of floating along aimlessly, this is exactly the kind of thing that can happen. That things can just go crashing down in an absolute hurry because there's no one behind the scenes to get things back in order and say, no, we're going to try this, we're going to do that. And for it not only to be, decisive, but also with some actual logic behind it. So I think that's really what's missing in St. Louis right now. I think, again, why ultimately just falls, to me, it falls on Mozeliak and Marmol. I don't really see how either of them survives this season if this keeps going as it does, and I think it's really hard to argue that either of them should. Although, the one really funny thing about the Cardinals right now, so they are 13-24, they are 7.5 games out of first place in the Central. One, the fact that being 11 games under 500 only leaves you 7.5 games out of first place. Do you want to know what the Cardinals' odds of winning the NL Central are?
I'm going to say like 62%.
That'd be incredible. 17%.
Oh, wow. I just went full NL Central doubt. Like, just even with this horrible, horrible situation, I was going to be like still somewhere in the 50s.
Do you know what the 22-14 Rangers, who are actually leading the American League West, do you know what their division winning odds are?
20%.
31.3%. There's not a huge gap between those two, and yet the Rangers are 10 games better than the Cardinals in the standings overall. That's the NL Central, baby. You can be so far into last place that you can barely see the sun